Let's get started. Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. Let me start out by introducing the ALP leadership team. This chart illustrates the team members, our roles and responsibilities. I am Bonnie O'Regan, and I've been the ALP facilitator since 2012. Joining this morning is Mrs. Tara Fogel from the Science Department. She and I work collaboratively with Mr. Mike Reed from Math and Dr. Benjamin Marcus from ELA. As an ALP leadership team, our primary goal is to maintain multiple effective lines of communication with all stakeholders. Please take note, when you communicate with one of us, you are indeed communicating with all of us. During this session, I will be answering the three most frequently asked questions. What is the placement process for ALP? Are there sample test questions? And when will the students take tests? And when will parents know if their students are placed? Before we get started into the placement process, let's start with what is the Advanced Learning Program, better known as ALP. In the Greenwich Public Schools, it is our policy to provide a comprehensive educational program for all students. The Advanced Learning Program uses a content replacement and acceleration programming model for students who give evidence of significantly high performance capability. For the 2022-23 school year, identified students in grades 3, 4, and 5 will meet daily in the ALP classroom in lieu of the general ed classroom to receive their instruction in reading, writing, math, and/or science. Greenwich uses a three-phase placement process to identify specific academic student needs and match learners with an appropriate education. This graphic shows that full process: referral, assessment, and placement. It looks a little overwhelming at first, so let's break it down. The referral phase is the direct procedure that enters a student into the evaluation phase. The referral process is broken down into three tiers. In tier 1, students are first flagged as potentially needing advanced program by a review of their academic performance. We call this their body of evidence. It includes assessments given at the district level. In tier 2, teachers add to this body of evidence by looking at assessments given in class and can also refer students. In tier 3, parents are invited to add even more information to the body of evidence. They can also opt to refer their child. The referral input form has been emailed to all parents in grades 2, 3, and 4 and can also be found on the district ALP website. On the parent input referral form, parents are asked to rate the frequency of observations on 5 behavioral characteristics and provide examples. A bit more about the form. The questions are based off the gifted behaviors continuum. This continuum compiles information on traits in 4 categories: cognitive, creative, affective, and behavioral. These markers and the markers in these forms are among the many used in the identification process. All students referred in all 3 tiers will complete a battery of secondary assessments to determine aptitude and ability in the evaluation phase. The evaluation phase is when the students take the assessments, which provide a multitude of information that's not already within that body of evidence gathered. Depending upon the academic referral area, students may take between 3 and 8 assessments. There is a COGAT, which is age normed. This assessment evaluates relationships, systems thinking, and cognitive abilities. Students also take an NWEA MAP assessment. This is grade level normed and assesses both content and concepts. This assessment is adaptive, giving students question at and above grade level. The final assessments are the performance tests. These are district level normed, open-ended responses that dig into application and reasoning. Now let's take a look at what each types of these assessments look like. The first type of assessment is an ability test. The ability test we use is a cognitive abilities test, better known as the COGAT. The COGAT is a test of reasoning skills. It is not like a spelling or math test where if you know the words or facts, you can get a 100%. There is no defined curriculum for the COGAT. In the verbal battery, students are presented with 20 to 24 questions in each of 3 subtests and are given a set amount of time to complete each subtest. In verbal analogies, Students examine a pair of words and think of ways in which they are related. They then apply this relationship to a third word to generate a new pair of words related to each other in the same way as the first pair. In sentence completion, students read an incomplete sentence, then select the answer choice that best completes the sentence. In the last subtest, verbal classification, students examine 3 words, think of ways in which they are alike, then select the answer choice that belongs in the same group. In the quantitative battery, the test questions require the same processes as in the verbal test, but use quantitative concepts rather than verbal concepts. The 3 subtests are between 16 and 18 questions each and are to be answered within a set amount of time. In number analogies, students examine 2 pairs of numbers and determine the rule that both pairs follow. Then they apply this rule to a given number and choose the number that generates a third pair of numbers that follow the same rule. In number puzzles, each question presents an equation in which elements are missing. Students must substitute numbers for the missing elements and solve the equation. In number series, each question contains a series of numbers that follow a pattern. First, students identify the rule that the numbers follow, then apply the rule to find the next number in the series. The second type of assessment is an achievement assessment, which measures what students know and what they're ready to learn next. The NWEA MAP growth assessment has replaced the use of STAR as our academic assessment. The NWEA MAP is a computer adaptive test. If your child answers a question correctly, the next question is more challenging and can be above grade level. If they answer incorrectly, the next one is easier, adapting so students are answering questions correctly approximately 50% of the time. This type of assessment challenges our very top performers without overwhelming students whose skills are at or below grade level. Now let's look at what some of the types of questions are that students may see. In the reading assessment, students' understanding of specific reading concepts are both literary and informational text. To assess students' knowledge within key ideas and details, students read and comprehend text, make inferences and predictions, and draw conclusions. Students are also asked to analyze the structure of literary and informational texts and evaluate author's craft and purpose. Finally, students are asked to use context clues and reference materials to decipher word meanings and nuances. In the math test, students' understanding is tested for math concepts. Within operations and algebraic thinking, students represent and solve problems involving all 4 operations. Here are some sample questions assessing students' knowledge of measurement and data. Note that students are asked to select correct answers, but not all of the questions are multiple choice. Some required constructed responses. The NWEA Science Assessment assesses students' understanding of life sciences, physical science, and earth and space science. For more sample test questions, you may go online. These are not the actual test or representative of the content of the assessment. It just shows some sample question types. So it really doesn't matter which grade level you choose for this. The last type of assessment we use are performance assessments, whereas COGAT helps answer the question, how well are you reasoning? And MAP NWEA answers the question, do you know it? The performance assessment helps answer the question, how well can you use your reasoning and what you know to generate knowledge? I'm sure you noticed that the questions within the COGAT and the NWEA MAP were either multiple choice or asked students to construct a specific answer in a specific way. Unlike the COGAT and MAP, the performance assessment requires students to perform a task and generate their own responses. In language arts performance assessment, students are asked to read a short piece of literature and respond to 4 open-ended questions. For sample purposes, let's use the text of the book, Horton Hears a Who. Now, given this story is longer than what's typical for an actual assessment, the literature selected for the actual assessment is written at grade level and can be read by students within approximately 5 minutes. Students are then asked questions about what they have just read. The most important component for every one of these questions that the students are using evidence from their story or the poem to support their answer. The students' responses are then scored on their demonstrated ability to analyze and interpret the text. For example, in response to the question about the quote from the story, what did Dr. Seuss mean when he said a person is a person no matter how small? A student who provides no evidence of understanding and really is making no interpretations would say, well, kids are people too. However, a response that says that the quote has nothing to do with height conveys a superficial understanding of the text. But by expanding upon this idea and that size doesn't matter and that humanity does, the student goes beyond that literal level and is actually interpreting the text using evidence. The math performance task, students are encouraged to think beyond their basic skills and by solving math problems that lend themselves to more than one way of solving. Here are some 3 sample questions. Note, none of the questions require students to use any math concept that has not previously been taught at grade level. In this sample, students are asked to apply their understanding of multi-digit addition and answer the question about the digits. Some questions require students to use their logical thinking skills. In this question, written for 4th graders, students apply logic and their multiplication skills. Upon completion of the test, we then move into the placement phase. Students' tests are scored, and these scores are further analyzed. A Z-score is calculated for each assessment, and the 3 Z-scores are averaged. What is a Z-score, you ask? Well, this statistical calculation explains and quantifies how a student performs in relation to the class, school, and district average. Once this is done, a score profile is created for every student. These score profiles are reviewed by a group of teachers, administrators, and members of the ALP leadership team at what we call a building advisory committee. This team conducts a comprehensive review of each child's full academic record and performance using the objective test data and the subjective input from the parent and teacher forms. All selection decisions reflect their best professional judgment to determine how best way to meet each child's individual needs. Generally speaking, students are recommended to ALP if their average Z-score places them within the top 10% of district achievement or the top 10% of their building achievement. There you have it, the entire placement process. Now remember, the development of gifts and talents are dynamic, constantly developing. Therefore, the placement process extends from 2nd through 8th grade. Opportunities are provided for students to be considered for placement in ALP throughout their school experience. There are 3 important dates that are important for you to know. The first one is the parent referral and input form. Parent input is a valuable component of the placement process. Please complete this form by Wednesday, March 23rd. The second date is actually a range of dates. It's for the assessments. Students will take all assessments between April 4th and May 13th. Now this window is a long window, it seems like, but there's time off for spring break in there and a bit of a cushion. So if your child is not feeling well on any of the scheduled test dates, makeup tests will be given within the window. The building specific dates will be emailed to you on March 30th and April 1st. The last date is when you will be informed of the committee's placement recommendation. Emails will be sent on Thursday, June 9th and Friday, June 10th. Included in this email will be scores from all of the assessments your child took and an invitation to a webinar, which we'll be talking more deeply about each of the scores and how they're interpreted. I'd like to once again thank you for your attention and then extend an invitation to ask questions at this time. If you have questions at any time, however, or have questions specific to your child, do not hesitate to email us. Please take note that when you communicate with one of us, then you communicate with all of us. Thank you. Questions? Who has the first one? If a child tests in to how many years do they stay in? If they test into for 3rd through 5th, And then we test again at the end of 5th for middle school placement. We switched from the STAR to the NWEA this year because we're no longer using the STAR as other than a universal screen at the primary level, and the NWEA is more adaptive and it has a greater variety of questions. Gives us more actionable data than what the STAR was able to give us. If a child is pulled out of for reading, math, and or science, then they're in their regular class for the rest of the subjects. So they will be doing homeroom for social studies, word study, and all of their ancillaries, the music, art, PE, media. Any extra homework? No. The students are 10 and they follow the same guidelines as in as other 10-year-olds or 8-year-olds. No, Linkit is not used as an additional assessment because it is a screening tool that we use for actionable classroom data that looks at how the students are doing on grade level concepts. Is it possible to understand how to read the test scores now before we go in? If you wish to talk to me about your child, you tested already. If you wish to talk with me about your child's test scores from before individually, I would be happy to do so.
Bonnie, we also have the recorded video that you did of the grade 2 score in TERP is available on the district website under information for parents. So we do have your last video when you did some scores. That's not comprehensive for all of the tests these students will be taking, but there are your video breakdown.
The only thing that's different between what we did in the fall and now is the addition of the NWEA science. So the score breakdowns and how we go about doing that is actually, I will be doing probably just that same video again. Are all 3 tests taken include the COGAT or the NWE and the performance test? So the 3 tests that go into their average Z-score for reading, it would be the verbal battery of the COGAT, the NWEA reading assessment, and their performance task like the Horton Hears a Hoot. For math, it would be their quantitative battery of the COGAT, their NWEA math, and their performance test, which would be the math problem solving questions. For science, it is their composite COGAT, which is a composite of their reading and the verbal and the quantitative COGAT and the NWEA science. If a student tests in at the end of 3rd grade for 4th grade, or at the end of 4th grade for out of 5th grade, that's part of our assessments is that we know where there's possible gaps in their knowledge base, and that they will be able to work with the ALP teacher if there are indeed any gaps. Generally, there's not. The testing for each subject, let me go back and I will go through each. Where am I? There am I. Okay, the COGAT. Each battery is 10 minutes. So the COGAT quantitative is 30 minutes of actual testing. The verbal is another 10 minutes per section. So that's 30 minutes of testing time. NWA map is untimed. However, most students are able to finish it between 40 and 60 minutes. The performance task math is 40 minutes of testing time, and the reading is 50 minutes testing time. They have 4 questions there. We approximate 10 minutes per written response, and about 5 minutes or so to read the question and 5 minutes to actually interact with it. Most kids don't need that full 50 minutes, but they do get that amount of time.
To summarize, if your student is testing for all 3 subjects, it's up to 7 hours of testing. If they are testing for 1 subject, it's around 3. For 2, it's around 6.
Thank you. Some tests are given paper pencil and some are paper pencil and some are using the device. The NWEA is device only because it's adaptive. The COGAT is device, is on their iPad, and the performance task is paper pencil.
And just to clarify, in terms of being distracted when using a device, they are on secure browsers. So it's the only opportunity for them to interact, or the only thing they can interact with on their device during the testing window is the assessment that we're giving them at that time.
Yes, the tests are done on different days. We will give the NWEA, we'll give the COGAT, we'll give the performance task all on different days. If a student, the only exception to that is if a student has started the NWEA map and has not completed it, and they have a few extra minutes when they have finished one of the other tasks, then we may put them on for another 5 minutes for that NWEA map to complete that.
When you're looking at this from a holistic point of view from just your student, they will not be taking more than 2 hours of testing per week. We were really crafty and intentional with our testing calendar to ensure that even if a student was testing for all 3 subjects, they would not spend more than 2 hours out of their general class time testing. So in 1 week, it may be 2 tests. If they're doing the COGAT, we have a little bit more flexibility because that's a shorter test. So in 1 week, they may do all 3 of those, but we've been really intentional about making sure that your students are not going to have some sort of testing fatigue and that their performance will be indicative of what they're able to do.
Now, on your testing schedule, you will not know which test it will be given which day. You will just know that they will be doing which days they're going to be actually giving the assessment. Maximum testing time per day is approximately 60 minutes. We will be posting the video on the website.
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning? Okay. We have the one from yesterday ready to roll, and we'll get this one up on there. If your child is ill on a scheduled day, you may toss me an email, or we'll just, when we go to pick them up, the classroom teacher will let us know that they're not in that day.
And generally, in terms of makeups, we wait till the end of a particular testing window, and then we catch all of the students who need to do a makeup all at once. And then we'll send back out a member of the district leadership team to handle those makeups. So that testing window ending on May 13th includes, I believe we gave ourselves a 10-day cushion for makeups at all 11 schools.
Yes, placement is for current second graders. First graders will, when they are going to second grade next year, will be participating in, all second graders are participating in the ALP enrichment at the beginning of the year.
Yes, so current testing is for placement in grades 3, 4, and 5. So we test our current grade 2, 3, and 4 students. All right, and as Bonnie said earlier, you can always get us via email, that advanced learning. Oh, another one, here we go.
Oh. Yes, it's an equal, yes, they're all 3 are weighted equally. It's a full average of the 3, no weighted averages. Any other questions? Thank you so much for joining us this morning.